Hi, my name is Brigitte Jia, and I'm a sophomore in the College of Arts and Science. I'm a neuroscience major, and I've been lucky enough to become a Buchanan Fellow for the fall of 2019. So because I'm a science-focused major here at Vanderbilt, I decided to focus on how science really got its start during the early foundation of Vanderbilt. So next to me here is a series of articles that actually ties Chancellor Landon C. Garland with the early foundations of Vanderbilt. So Garland was a very academic individual, and he greatly prioritized learning, education, and the collection of materials that helped further scientific learning in particular. And he occupied a lot of positions at different institutions before he arrived at Vanderbilt. What's interesting about Garland is that while there's a lot of different accounts of him as a mentor, as a wise old professor who really cared about the learning of his students, there's also an anecdote of him from kind of the later years of the war that show him with a fiery character as well. So Garland occupied a position at the University of Alabama. He was a professor there, and when Sherman's forces were marching to the Atlantic at the tail end of the war, they were initially supposed to bypass any Southern institutions of higher learning. But Garland, being the staunch Southern man that he was, he decided to take his students and march them towards the federal troops in a sort of last stand thing. And so unfortunately, because of that act of aggression, the federal troops turned back around and razed the University of Alabama. And with it, Garland's collection of volumes of books of knowledge, everything that he held dear to him, just they were burned to the ground. So Garland is left without a position and without his books of knowledge. And in this letter right here to his sister Caroline, he expresses a lot of sorrow because he's lost his most prized possessions. But luckily, he served as the old teacher of Bishop Holland McTeer, who was starting a new institution in Nashville. So they came into contact again, and Garland decided to come down to Nashville and help start this new institution of regional Southern learning that wasn't going to be centered just around the town of Nashville. It was going to be a regional, big thing. So Garland comes down, and he takes a sizable portion of the funds that Cornelius Vanderbilt provided, and he goes on this sort of scientific expedition, if you will, to all the greatest hubs of technology in Europe. He goes to Paris, he goes to London, he goes to Munich, and he gathers the most cutting-edge technologies of that age. This is 1875, the spring, and this is in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. So essentially, Garland puts Vanderbilt at the forefront of technological advancement in an age of technological creation. He really establishes Vanderbilt as a top university. Garland went on to become the chancellor of Vanderbilt, a professor for many, many years who continued to propagate the learning of his students. And he established the first departments of educational learning at Vanderbilt. So all in all, he made Vanderbilt what it is today. We have a hall now, Garland Hall, named after him, and we have a lot of honors that are given to him because he really put us, again, at that forefront of technological advancement. So for me personally, I am a neuroscience major, but I'm also interested in history. I'm hopefully trying to double major in the two in order to kind of find an integration between the two fields. Because I feel like right now there's a division between your sciences and your humanities. So I was able to work with these objects and talk with a professor of history, Professor Ole Molvig, who is actually in charge of the Garland instruments of physics. And that's interesting because he's a professor of history, but he's in charge of this collection of scientific instruments that furthered medicine, physics, chemistry at Vanderbilt in its early stages of development. So for me, that was really interesting to see as I delved further into discovering more about Garland and more about the university as a whole in its early days. Because there was really an integration back then of science and of history. There were studies that Garland espoused that were not part of the strictly basic sciences fields. He wanted to push law and literature and biblical studies. And he was also a professor of physics and of the sciences. And so I'm hoping that with this research into both the sciences and the histories of early Vanderbilt, we're able to kind of come to that crossroads where history and science are together in the modern day as well as in history.